Up next, we have two leaders from the UN to provide an update on global humanitarian relief. There are daily media reports on crises from natural disasters to conflict to the refugee crises. These emergencies impact all of us, and it's more urgent than ever that we have clarity on how businesses can support these vital efforts. We will first hear from Ramesh Rajasingham, Acting Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator for UN OCHA. Ramesh will be followed by Kelly Clements, Deputy High Commissioner at the UN Refugee Agency, with a special briefing on the state of the humanitarian crises and how the private sector can help. Please welcome Ramesh.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed for that introduction, also for this opportunity to speak about a very important issue for all of us. As you may know, OCHA is a part of the United Nations that's responsible for coordinating global emergency response to save lives and protect people in humanitarian crises and disasters. And this has indeed been a very challenging year, as you can imagine, to say the least. 238 million people will need humanitarian assistance and protection this year alone. This is the highest figure that we have seen in decades. And for the first time since the 1990s, extreme poverty has increased. Life expectancy has already fallen. The annual death toll from HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria is set to double. We fear a near doubling of the number of people facing starvation, and many girls out of school may never go back. No single organization in and of itself can meet, let alone end these needs. If we do not work collectively, adopting a whole of society approach, then we risk not just a failure to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, but an unraveling of the last 40 years of development and progress. The unprecedented scale of humanitarian needs calls for an unified approach in which the private sector works hand in hand with governments, civil society, humanitarian organizations, and affected people themselves to alleviate human suffering. Working together to prepare for, respond to, and recover from humanitarian emergencies has to be a win-win proposition. After all, businesses of all sizes are themselves affected by crises, and they play a critical role in providing livelihoods for the most vulnerable people and preserving stability for the communities in which they operate. Local businesses are often among the first responders in any emergency, providing not only funds, but also critical goods, services, and expertise. And it is for these reasons that OCHA and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, partnered to launch the Connecting Business Initiative, or CBI, at the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016. CBI strategically engages the private sector before, during, and after emergencies, increasing the scale and effectiveness of the response and recovery in a coordinated manner. UN Global Compact shares these goals, and as a member of the CBI Executive Committee, partners with us on preparedness, adaptation, response, and recovery to build stronger and more resilient communities. I recently returned from Haiti, which suffered a devastating earthquake just last month. There, the Alliance for Risk Management and Business Community, a local business federation and member of CBI, immediately mobilized its members to provide drinkable water, fuel, solar panels, clothing, and other essentials to affected communities. In Sri Lanka, the Asia-Pacific Alliance for Disaster Management, Sri Lanka, also another CBI member network, has mobilized the private sector to respond to recurring floods, droughts, landscapes, helping hundreds of thousands of affected people. Global Compact members recognize the value of private sector involvement in achieving their SDGs. My message today is that the private sector has an equally important role to play in responding to humanitarian emergencies. When we work together, we can make sure that we leave no one behind. And when we work together, communities recover faster and more efficiently from disasters. Thank you very much again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ramesh, for that. Kelly, over to you.
Thank you for the invitation today, and to you, Tolu, for moderating. And I'm delighted to join my friend Ramesh in this special briefing. The UN Refugee Agency protects and aids people forced to flee and stateless individuals around the globe. We're 70 years old this year, not something we celebrate. When UNHCR was created in 1950, we had a temporary 3-year mandate. World events made our task a long-lasting one. Today, we are in 135 countries with operations in some of the toughest and most remote locations around the world. We do this with over 1,100 partners, business, other agencies, non-governmental organizations, governments, communities that host displaced and refugees, and of course, refugees and displaced themselves, who are core to our action. There are 82.4 million people living in forced displacement today, over 1% of the world's population, which together would be equivalent to the 20th largest country on Earth. We've had 9 consecutive years of increased numbers of people forced to flee, nearly a decade in which each year has been worse than the last. And while in parts of the world we feel we may be coming out of the worst of the pandemic, refugees and displaced people have been particularly hard hit. Border closures and lockdowns for COVID-19 made it difficult, at times impossible, to reach those in need. It impacts the ability of people to seek asylum. And at the peak of the pandemic, some 164 countries closed their borders, 99 states making no exception for people seeking asylum. We have seen scapegoating, discrimination, attacks on refugees, as well as humanitarian staff perceived as conveyors of the virus. Economic contraction has hit those in the informal economy the hardest, disproportionately affecting refugees and displaced. We have witnessed an increase in sexual and gender-based violence towards women and girls in particular. In a joint World Bank and UNHCR survey, refugees in Uganda, host to the most refugees in Africa, were reportedly experiencing mental health and psychosocial support needs from the pandemic at rates 10 times higher than the local community. School closures have disrupted education for millions of refugee children and youth, many of whom struggle to adapt to at-home learning due to a lack of connectivity and support services. UNHCR data suggests that 50% of refugee girls in secondary education may not return when the classrooms reopen. In short, the pandemic has pushed refugees and other displaced people already in a precarious situation into even more vulnerable circumstances. While addressing these extensive needs may seem daunting, dear friends, there is reason for hope. We have seen the potential of our impact while working alongside partners of a truly global response, especially with the private sector partners. We have seen the private sector stepping up and integrating the Sustainable Development Goals into their sustainability agenda, and indeed their core business, particularly the obligation to include refugees, to leave no one behind and to reach those furthest behind first. Make no mistake, the SDGs cannot be achieved without taking into account the rights and the needs of the forcibly displaced. And this is where the private sector comes in, where you come in. By including refugees and displaced persons in your company's work and your agenda, you can make a huge difference. We are privileged to be working with some of the very committed corporate partners, some of whom I am sure are online today. Some of the initiatives are truly transformative. To take a few examples. Since 2013, we have worked with the Vodafone Foundation on the Instant Network Schools program. Essentially, it's a traditional classroom that's been transformed into an innovation hub for learning, complete with a full digital school in a box, connectivity support, localized digital content, and a robust teacher training program. We're rolling out this solution to new locations. Some 300,000 students and 3,500 teachers in 6 locations have benefited from the program. IKEA, specifically the Inca Group, has pledged to support 2,500 refugees through job training and language skill initiatives in 300 IKEA stores in 30 countries by next year. This is 1% of IKEA's global workforce. It takes vision, foresight, and courage, and the business case is also there. Just ask the hundreds of companies who are employing refugees. The global legal community has also stepped up. At the Global Refugee Forum in 2019, PillNet, an NGO, brought together 28 law firms, bar associations, and corporations to provide over 127,000 pro bono hours a year to civil society organizations that support refugees. We know that this private sector brings unique approaches, creativity to resolving the most complex challenges. We need to work together to find solutions and get others involved. So you may ask, what can we do together? First, you can advocate. Help us change the narrative around refugees and foster a more inclusive society, for example, through cost-related marketing campaigns. Second, continue to innovate. There is no one better placed than the private sector to innovate. All ideas are welcome. Third, support inclusion and employment. Refugees and displaced persons want to build their futures. They are innovators and entrepreneurs. And given opportunities through digital work opportunities, training, educational support, partnering with refugee business, you can support that future. And fifth, financial support. Maybe not the most exciting, but it's one of the most important ways to help. The challenges are massive and we need all the support we can get. We need your leadership, your experience, and your innovation to meet these challenges together and to deliver the sustainable response that the forcibly displaced need and deserve. Thank you for your attention and, importantly, your support to tackle the challenges, seize the opportunities in the months and years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Those were extremely informative briefings. All right, time for the next piece of our programming. I am so excited to share this news with you. Absolutely thrilled to share that the UN Innovation Room series is back for another season. This year, we will be speaking with UN leaders, breaking barriers to tackle some of the world's most complex issues. Our first episode streams tomorrow, Tuesday, September 21st, and features executives from the United Nations, UNICEF, and WHO. Follow me on Twitter at Tolu_Olubumi or on LinkedIn for more details. Also, here's a sneak preview.